You're listening to the MurphologyPodcast. Thanks for tuning in to the MurphologyPodcast. AKA Murph here to share interviews about biking experiences from bicyclists who have pedaled to places all over the U.S. Each week, we will get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these adventures, you may wonder, why haven't I done that yet? All right, well, on the show today is Rob Knoth. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Kathy.
How are you doing today?
Fantastic. How you doing?
Good. It's a nice, dreary, rainy weather here in Iowa, but I guess that beats snow.
Yeah. Well, it depends what kind of bike you're riding. But,
Yeah.
it is no bad weather. There's only bad bike choices.
Right, yeah, I'd have to, if I was out today, I'd be on the bike with fenders for sure. Well, I wanted to have you on the show to talk about some of your adventures via bike packing, and you specialized in creating like bike packing routes that were suitable for families. So I really want to get into that. But why don't we start out by having you tell the listeners a little bit about where you live and what being on a bicycle is like there?
Yeah, definitely. So my family and I, we live in Bend, Oregon. And so that's just on the sunny side of the mountains in Oregon. So it's a high desert. We get snow in the winter. It's a great place to ride. We're, very fortunate. It's right at the juncture of, where the mountains merge into the high desert. So if you ride west, you've got beautiful, forested volcanic slopes. If you go east, you've got lots of fun, juniper and sage desert single track. So it's a great mix of lots of mazes of gravel roads and beautiful flowy single track. But probably the thing that, sets it all off the most of what we like riding around here is there's not a whole lot of people in Oregon. But those that are here, we all love it intensely. And so you don't really run into a lot of people. And it's a great place to ride.
Awesome. And it sounds beautiful.
It's fun.
Yeah. I actually am going to be in Bend, Oregon in August for a wedding. And so I'm trying really hard to figure out how to extend that trip a couple more days so that I can go out and enjoy, the mountains or a bike ride or a hike or something. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a great season, and definitely, it's not the easiest place to get to. So if you're going to make the effort to get here from Iowa, you got to ride.
I agree. Yeah. Well, speaking of riding there, do you have a couple like specific great places that you would either recommend people ride or that you always ride?
Yeah, definitely. And it all depends on what you're looking for. And that's, kind of the thing that we love about, being here and the kind of riding that we have is that, we have everything from more technical, Black Diamond single track riding to the mountain here just opened up a lift accessible downhill park, which we've yet to try, to just, days and days of gravel roads and everything. But, for me specifically, we're fortunate. Kind of the daily driver ride is either Phil's Trails, which is like a maze of single track that's just to the west of town, or any of the Deschutes National Forest gravel roads when it's kind of, mucky out, right now in the shoulder season. Single track's kind of at a premium on the west side. And so, but, you can easily put out a 50-mile loop on a gravel bike without blinking an eye. So
nice. I did some gravel riding this past weekend just on my fat bike, but it was kind of cheating because, after you've had a winter of lots of snow, there wasn't a whole lot of gravel. It was more just like packed down mud, dirt, but still, what a blast.
That's not cheating at all. You're turning the pedals and it's all good.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about all these different choices as far as where to bike, do you have a bike of choice, or I probably should say bikes of choice?
I mean, I heartily believe, and this is one thing that I think, especially with respect to bike packing, it's an important thing to get the message out there that you got to ride what you have, and that it's really nice to have a good quiver. It can improve your enjoyment or let you access farther, distances, but it's really easy to, I think, get lost in all of the specialization and equipment and types of bikes and gear and get worried that you need XYZ or you can't do it. And that's not true. But that being said, a good quiver helps you enjoy it a lot more. And so I think for me, it's really kind of, my Fatback Rhino, which is, kind of a beautiful daily driver in the winter and the shoulder seasons. But even, in the summer, I love that as like my bike packing rig of choice for any of our, family-based adventures. Really those fat tires help chew up a lot of the dusty gravel, et cetera, without getting bogged down. And it's fun to ride on snow. On the other spectrum of that, for like faster gravel riding, I have a Kona Sutra LTD. It's a newer member to my quiver. I've mostly stayed on the mountain bike side, but it's kind of fun to go fast. So that's been a lot of fun to explore, but I really haven't taken that bike packing yet. And then the third one, and I couldn't talk about, riding, and especially the topic you want to get into about family riding without mentioning the tandem. My son and I ride a Cannondale Tandem 29er, and that's been vehicle of adventure for many, many good adventures. It's not a sexy bike, but it's amazing what it does in terms of your whole family's enjoyment when you're out riding fun, big rides that you would do on your own without, thinking twice.
And how old is your son that is on? I'm assuming he's on the back of the tandem.
Yep. Yeah. So Max, our son, is 9, and he's a very enthusiastic rider. Just has to grow a few more inches, and we'll be setting him up with his own fat bike as well. Right now, he's a pretty powerful stoker.
That's awesome. I assume you bike year round.
Yes.
Yes.
In the past, prior to fat bikes, definitely it was more of like, spring, summer, fall. And then in the winter, I would have my road bike set up on a trainer in the garage. But now with the fat bike and, more especially just, I think, my own mental shift, it's really fun to ride year round, and it just depends on what you're looking for. And, definitely the bigger popularity of gravel, the bigger variety of tires and equipment for it. It's kind of changed, I think, all of our mindset about what riding year round can be.
Definitely. And what a change in my mindset from years ago, where I felt like you had to go really fast to get a good workout. But let me tell you, you get those fat tires rolling, and if it's any sort of mud, dirt, gravel, snow, you can get a sweat going pretty quick.
Oh yeah. And that's, actually been like one thing that a fat bike, I think, it really helps open up a lot of people's eyes as far as just possibilities. And a lot of people look at them and think, oh, you that's only for you riding in the snow or whatever, but tremendously fun on, everything from gravel, to single track. Definitely you feel a little silly when you're, plowing down like a paved road on them, but the loops and whatnot that you can open up really make them fun.
A quick interruption to tell you this week's podcast is sponsored by Lizard Lips Lip Balm. These great lip balms contain natural ingredients, come in a variety of flavors, and you can choose certified organic or balms with sun protection. Check it out at lizardlips.net. Now back to the show. Well, when you're not out biking, where can you be found?
In the winter, regularly get out to do family downhill skiing. That's been a lot of fun, especially as our son's gotten older. We do quite a bit of traveling and adventure, with and without the bikes. Took a really fun family trip to Sri Lanka a few years ago that was a lot of fun. As far as sports, I spent a lot of my youth climbing, but now it's kind of 100% focus, more on, family bike packing and whatnot. For paying the bills at work, my wife and I, we both work out of the house. She owns her own business, and I work remotely for a software company in California. And we do quite a bit of volunteer work for a charity in town, Family Kitchen, which helps, feed the hungry. Other than that, it's a whole lot of riding.
Yeah. And is Mount Hood in Bend, or is that Portland?
So that's just outside of Portland.
Okay.
But kind of, there's a spine of mountains that goes up and down Oregon, the Cascades and Hoods, the very farthest north one. Just to the west of us, we've got like a small range of them, the Three Sisters, Mount Bachelor, Broken Top, and then just a little bit north of that, Mount Jefferson.
Okay. I was lucky enough one summer, I think it was like mid-June, that we were able to go skiing down Mount Hood, which was crazy because, early in the morning, skiing was great. Well, then it got real slushy because, of course, the temperature.
Yep.
And then so they'd kind of shut it down for a few hours. And then once around dusk time, they reopened. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun.
It's pretty neat. I mean, and that's, one of the great things about Oregon is you really do have a good variety of sports accessible all year round.
Mm-hmm.
And, like we're entering into the season now here in Bend. It's real often that, you'll be doing downhill skiing and mountain biking in the same day and, just without blinking an eye.
Well, okay. So if people are envisioning all the fun things that you do, your Instagram account is just awesome. You have great photos. And I actually wrote down adventure with a capital A because I just think that you and your fam are out doing fun stuff all the time, or at least documenting it well.
It's definitely a little bit of both.
Yeah.
We do tend to, especially in the summer, we get out pretty much every weekend to go bikepacking.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those are big trips and some of those are, just ride from our house and camp out and ride back.
Yeah.
But we like to keep it very frequent.
Yeah. And I know when we were emailing back and forth, you mentioned you were going on a overnight backpacking trip with your son, which I was like super jealous about. I'm like, what? It's like the middle of the week. This is so cool. But do you want to get into a little bit about, bikepacking suitable for families and how you got into that and just, a little bit about what you want to share?
Yeah, definitely. It's something that we're all, our whole family is very passionate about. I would say, just to kind of preface like how we got into it, that riding as a family it's really very liberating and amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It just needs a little different mindset, right, than what you would do just riding solo or just riding with a group of adults. But the key thing, though, is that mindset shift doesn't require it to become lame. Like it doesn't mean right. Limit your goals, right? It doesn't mean, like put a brake on your ambition. And I think a lot of cyclists come into it with that mindset. And so they poo-poo it. But what we've really found, and, I give my wife a ton of credit for this. She's been a big instigator and definitely our son being open and flexible to this has really helped. But we've accomplished and gone on rides that, I would have never imagined, before we started this journey that we would have tackled. And the whole thing is you just got to kind of look for a new way to make some of these big goals happen. Mm-hmm. But the end experience is so much richer when you're out there with your whole family than when you're just by yourself. It all kind of got summed up, I think, with, the last day when we were on the Baja Divide Cape Loop. So like before we were finishing up and had just finished breakfast and, finished the last of our water. And my wife kind of looked over at me and she just said, I'm not ready to go home yet.
Uh-huh.
And it's just when you've figured out a way to make bikepacking work as a family, that adventure becomes sustainable and self-perpetuating. That's just what makes it amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I guess to answer your question, so how we got into this, though, it really started, we weren't living in Bend at the time. We were in Portland, and, there's a lot of work stress, and we weren't real happy with kind of where we were living and, the sacrifices we were making. And so my wife and I both rode a ton independently before that, and but we were really missing sort of the easy access of wilderness and the outdoors that we had in Bend. And so a lot of stress built up there. Mm-hmm. And one weekend I just sort of decided to take my son and I, he was about 4. My wife had some other obligations that weekend. And so Max and I went out on just an overnight to where like the Deschutes River empties into the Columbia. There's a rails to trails path there. And so he's just a little 4-year-old. And, I had like my road bike commuter with a heavy Adams trailer bike attached
Yep.
to it and strapped all sorts of things with bungee cords on the bike. And, he was wearing like rubber galoshes, and it's a heat wave. And, just like, it was ridiculous. And we got like flats every like tenth of a mile, and, ran out of tubes. And, I think maybe we went a whole of like 3 or 4 miles.
Oh
Right.
man.
And I'm cursing the whole thing and thinking, what am I doing? I'm so stupid on this. But then we stopped and we found a place to camp down by the river, and, went swimming and laughed at the fact that the Hershey bar I had brought for his dessert was like this melted puddle of goo. And, and then, made dinner and set up, like, just laid our sleeping bags out with a bug net over it. And night fell and he fell asleep, and then the moon rises over the canyon edge and it's all ghostly white. And I woke him up, and we just like sat there and just watched it, and we were hooked from
Yeah.
then on. So
I'm hooked just thinking
yeah.
about it, just like listening to this. But a quick interruption to tell you this week's sponsor is Thirsty Pigs, a full service mobile event company offering beer, wine, spirits, plus catering for any indoor or outdoor event. Check out more at thirstypigs.com. Now back to the show. Before we get into some of the trips that you've been on, like, how do you actually define bike packing? Because you mentioned, like that first trip, you were bungee cording everything and you've got the heavy tag along behind you. But do you define bike packing a specific way?
Yes and no. I think it comes in so many forms, and in many ways, I think you can almost use it interchangeably with bike touring. It's all a state of mind. There's not a specific bike you need or a specific way you're going to pack your stuff, or it's just more this flexibility that you have. And I'd say that if anything, what I would kind of attach more to bike packing is, in general, you take more of a backpacking mindset as opposed to a car camping mindset. And so, you're traveling a little lighter, but your goal is to get a little more off the beaten path. And so you're not really, riding tons of paved roads. In general, you're going to be more on gravel or single track. But that's all flexible, right? Like last spring break, we were going to go do a bikepacking trip down in Utah and got rained out. So we ended up just piecing something together in Oregon, where we went from, little B&Bs and hotels and didn't camp at all. And so that was technically a bike tour, but our son still refers to that as one of his favorite bike packing trips, right? So, I don't get too bent out of shape about the terminology, but yeah, in general, I'd say just carry a little less, and, you're riding a little more wild.
Right. And anytime, whether it's touring or bike packing, it's basically just taking your stuff with you and going. So whether it's, like you said, less pavement or, Airbnbs the whole way, to me, it's still total adventure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all state of mind.
Yeah. Well, give us some highlights of some of the bike packing trips that you've been on.
Sure. I'd say probably the one that, really sticks out in my mind probably the most was maybe in many ways some of our most adventurous one we've done to date is not this past Christmas, but the one before that. We did the Baja Divide Cape Loop. And so for people who don't know, the Baja Divide is this beautiful route that Nicholas Carmen and Lael Wilcox put together that goes down the spine of the Baja Peninsula. So from San Diego all the way down to the end. At the very bottom, the route kind of makes almost looks like an exclamation mark. So you got this little loop at the very bottom. And so we flew in to San Jose del Cabo, and I had packed up our bikes in boxes, and if anyone's ever flown with a tandem, my hat's off to you, because that's non-trivial to trick into a cardboard bike box. But we made it work.
Wow.
I dusted off my high school Spanish, and, we spent 2.5 weeks, circling, going across from the, Pacific Ocean to the Sea of Cortez and back down, and camped half the time, stayed in, little hotels half the time, ate 141 tacos between the three of us. And it was great. And, tons of stuff broke. but we were able to fix it and, kept going. And it was a really magical time, and like some real memorable parts of that, like when we first rolled out of San Jose del Cabo and we were starting it and everything was kind of going great. And we had heard about this stretch that was called the power line stretch that was just supposed to be this nasty, like ankle deep sand for, several kilometers. And I kind of looked at our map and estimated where I thought that was. And so I'm like, okay, well, we'll just ride the pavement a little farther and skip it, and patted myself on the back and thought that we had made a great route choice. So we're riding and we get off the pavement, we get onto the track and immediately encountered the steepest hike bike we had ever done as a family.
Oh, no.
And, this is like our first day. We're only out a couple hours and we're thinking, oh my God, like what are we doing? And then we get to the top of that and we have a little lunch and then we like start riding and I'm thinking, okay, but at least we didn't have that power line section. And then I see over the horizon this big long stretch of power lines and I'm like, this road's going right there. And sure enough, like, for the next few hours we were like, ride a few feet, get off, push, ride a few feet, get off, push. It's just like, it's terrible. There's like no shade. And we're all just grumpy and, kind of mad. And either way, we finally get through it. And then we look over to our right and there's a paved road, the one that we were on before, maybe about a quarter of a mile away. And we all just like looked at that and started just cackling maniacally. But from then on, it was really good. But I would say that I had some real mental highs and lows on that trip. Like, a rallying cry of our family became arroyo time when, like, an arroyo is like this dry riverbed that like cuts through your path. And so while you might be looking at your day's elevation and thinking, oh, sweet, I got a 30-mile, it's mostly downhill, but you'll end up doing thousands of feet of climbing over that because you drop into this little hole and climb back out, and it's too small to show up on any kind of elevation profile. But you do that over and over, and it works you. But no, it was really great. It was a fantastic trip. It really, I think, as a family, it brought us together even closer, depending on each other, being in some hard situations, being in some fun situations. It's sure not bad camping on the beach and, swimming in the ocean and eating good tacos and enjoying a wonderful society. Like it was a really good trip, and it really broadened my horizon and our horizons to what's possible with riding.
Well, and not to mention, I'm still stuck on the fact that you were able to get a tandem bike into a cardboard box. Like,
it was, I ended up getting 2 fat bike boxes and mating them together, and then creative uses of duct tape so it didn't look too unnatural.
Right.
And some really God bless Alaska Airlines and their baggage handlers and check-in people. No one batted an eye at it.
And then the other thing I'm amazed by is the quantity of tacos. Like, I think, but I think I would have done like double that, because you can't beat a good taco when you're out in that sort of atmosphere.
Amen. No, it's fantastic, and I've got to say that for anyone who is at all curious. That route it's hard, it's fun, but the people are friendly, and man, you're right, you can't beat a good taco.
Oh, that's great. And that was the Baja Divide, right?
Yes. And kind of, I'd say like another trip that kind of contrasts that, is the one I was telling you about over email. So this, with the coronavirus kind of, locking things down. I travel a lot for work, and so all of a sudden that's gone, and our son, his school's canceled until the end of April. So we kind of looked at it, and he and I just, I had a morning or an afternoon when I didn't have a lot of meetings, and then the next day I didn't have much to do in the morning. So he and I just loaded up our bikes and headed out of town, and grabbed burritos on the way out. And, just camped overnight and woke up at 5 a.m. the next day and brushed the frost off our bags and rolled back by headlamp and, got back here, but, before anyone was awake or the sun was up. And bike packing and any kind of bike travel doesn't have to be big. It just, it's got to stoke the fire in your heart. And, little things like that overnight, those are some of the most powerful trips that we've been on.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of doing things like that with the bike packing is more the experience. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really matter where you're going or how long it takes you to get there, but it's like the little moments where you're, ankle deep in sand and you're pushing it through and you're mad at everybody and mad at the world. And then probably the next day you're like, that was the best part of my day yesterday.
And you're so right. And it's not even the next day. It'll be like the next hour.
Right.
And bike packing, it's most people who do it have a certain appreciation for type 2 fun, like the stuff that's fun, not when you're doing it, but afterwards. And you end up encountering that so much with this kind of a sport, but it makes all those experiences richer.
Right.
And it's addictive.
Right, definitely. Well, you touched a little bit on it, but how would you describe biking with young people? How you said it's way different than when you've got a bunch of the guys with you or you and your wife are on a ride. So how would you describe like some of the differences when you have somebody young with you?
That's a good question. And it really is something, we try to plan out and create a lot of routes to help families, just like us, get out and experience this. On one side, riding with young people is no different, than any kind of riding you do. You just have to think a little more about distances. It's really more about, it's a cheesy expression, but it's more about, the smiles than the miles. As a parent, you can't get aggro on your kid, right? Like, their legs are shorter, their wheels are smaller, they're working their hearts off, and you don't want to get them to hate this thing that you love. And so when your kid is kind of done riding, you got to be ready to be done riding,
right.
And so when we're planning trips, usually it's no more, even if we're riding on the tandem, we'll try to stick to 30 miles a day. Less than that if he's riding his own bike. You try to make sure that your campsites are fun. It's not just like, oh, here's where we stopped, right? And so being a little more creative about knowing where lakes, rivers, places of water are, being smarter about when you take breaks, so that you kind of enjoy it. But it teaches you to kind of enjoy not just the time on the bike, but the time off the bike as well. And that's a key thing. It's just really riding with kids helps you just appreciate the world more. You're not just white line fever pounding out the miles.
Now, you've mentioned a couple times, like, when you're talking about riding as a family and creating routes, do you actually share those with other families, or do you have a resource that you go to, or do you just look at a map and say, I've got to figure this out on my own?
Hands down, the most valuable utility, for bike packing, period, whether it's, by yourself or families, ride with GPS. It's a software service, free to use. We're ambassadors for them also. But it's a kind of an open source mapping platform. And it is so critical because you can better not only see routes other people have ridden, but you can share your routes, and on them it'll have not just the roads you're riding, but you annotate it up to here's where a good camp is, or here's where good water is, or here's a store, or things like that. And so it's so much easier for you to take routes that other people have ridden and see, okay, well, that would work for us, or, hey, okay, well, if I change it a little bit, okay, I could make this into a family route. And so that's, definitely a absolutely critical resource, because when you're bike packing and you're doing more stuff that is on forest roads or, single track or things like that, you won't have a ton of signage that you would when you're riding in towns or
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So a utility like Ride with GPS is so valuable to make sure that you're spending more time riding and enjoying than, face into a map trying to figure out, is this junction of three unnamed roads this one or that one? I
Right.
couldn't imagine pulling off we've done week plus long trips out, where we don't go through towns, on the east side of Oregon where, if I had to do that on a map, there's no way I'd plan things as ambitious as what you can pull off with these kind of mapping software.
Mm-hmm. And I have used Ride with GPS before, and I agree it's a great resource. And the neat thing I like about it is that it's an app on your phone, so you can use it live, and have it mounted on your bike handlebars. But you can also like use it as research. Like
Yep.
the weekend before you're getting ready for a trip, you can log on and look at, like you said, what other people have posted, reviews about stuff, and it's just a great resource.
Yeah. Amen. It's, I feel like so many things kind of came together where, that it's made bike packing this popular. Bikes and wheel sizes and bags are one, but Ride with GPS and the other kind of like GPS based mapping software, that's a critical piece of the story.
Mm-hmm. I have asked this question to other people on this podcast, and you can't say Ride with GPS because we already talked about that. But do you have any luxury items that you really don't need, but you always take along on bike trips?
I would definitely say that Ride with GPS I would not qualify that as a luxury
That's
item.
a necessity, right?
That's a necessity for me. Otherwise, my routes wouldn't be that long.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the easiest answer for me to this is no. I
Oh.
don't qualify them as luxury items because I've already made the decision before I've rolled out of the house. This is important to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so other people might qualify them as a luxury item, but pool noodles that are masquerading as lightsabers have been on our bike several times. And I would not qualify that as a luxury item, because we did this trip over 4th of July where we were out for a week in the like kind of southern Oregon Cascades, and there's some really hot, steep, long climbs, and we would stop at the top of each of them, and we had 3 pool noodles that we had kind of pretended were lightsabers, and we would have sword fights at the top of each of these climbs. And our family really got to look forward to them. And
Mm-hmm.
sure, carrying a pool noodle is vaguely ridiculous on a bikepacking trip, but keeping the family stoke alive so that you're not just getting beat down by mosquitoes and long climbs, that's pretty invaluable.
Yeah, I agree.
And like for Baja, we carried a set of kind of battery powered Christmas lights, and we would string those on the inside of our tent at night. And that's, you could say, luxury. On the other side, that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
It was, it helped with reading, so you didn't have to burn your headlamp. And it just was a little more festive. It was Christmas.
Christmas every night. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Do you have any adventures on the calendar for this year, 2020?
It's a really good question. So we had originally planned over Christmas, this past Christmas, to go ride the Sky Islands Loop in southern Arizona. And that got nixed because of rain and snow down there. Then, we had planned a pretty big trip over the Oregon spring break, but, with kind of the situation that's going on now with coronavirus, I think we'll probably be doing a lot of day rides. And, originally we had planned in June to be headed to Spain. There's this beautiful route out there called the Montañas Vaquias route that's like a huge loop out in southeastern Spain that's been put together and featured on bikepacking.com. So we were planning on heading out there, but we'll see what happens in June.
Sure.
But that's definitely the biggest one. But I would say overall, just looking forward to, more riding as a family. Every year our son gets older and gets more ambitious on what he's going to ride by himself. And so there'll be plenty of good rides in Oregon, and hopefully, some good international ones.
Yeah. Well, and even those day trips, though, I mean, I guess they don't need to be on the calendar, but they sometimes make up some of the best adventures.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Heartily agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, so we have to tell, families who have young ones, that they need to go check out Ride with GPS. But do you have any other advice you would give somebody who's maybe thinking, I've got a preteen, not sure if they'd be in for biking? Like, what sort of advice would you give them?
I'd say biggest one, just go, just do it. Make it easy. Don't make it complicated. Make it, if possible, something you can ride from your house. People of all ages, there's a magic to not just riding a bike, but when you can ride a bike and camp and then you ride back, it opens up this childlike wonder and also this infinite set of possibilities that you can go off and do. And so I would say, don't worry about what gear you have. Everyone's got a sleeping bag somewhere and some bungee cords and a bike. And you load that up, little thing for some water. Don't be afraid about bringing, like burritos or a slice of cold pizza. You don't have to know how to use a camping stove. You don't have to, have godlike bicycle repairability. The worst thing that'll happen is you have to walk a little bit. So just go find some public land near you and, make it happen. And it's especially for, families who have young kids or older kids, biking is such a great equalizer, because if you're going to go backpacking, the difference between what an adult can do and a kid can do is pretty big. If you're going to just ride your bikes, that equalizes things out really quickly. And, whether you're using a tandem or a trailer bike or, everyone's on their own bike, you can still get up to some good trouble. And, and it really helps, all the members of the family.
So true. Probably time to get another bike packing trip on the calendar right now.
Amen.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the podcast, and hopefully you and your wife are set for many, many bike packing trips to come, as well as your son, Max.
Definitely. It's you can't count us down, and so they might be modified a bit with what's going on with coronavirus, but there's always something on the horizon.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much, and I'd definitely like to give a shout out to Ride with GPS for helping out. Fatback Bikes. We also are a strong supporter of those guys. They make really excellent machines out there. And then 2 local trail associations that have, been big help for a lot of the adventures we've done. The Oregon Timber Trail, led by Gabe Amadeus, spanning like a single track route all the way on the length of Oregon. And then our local trail organization, CODA, here in Bend, is responsible for keeping all of our single track open.
And we can't do it without volunteers like that. We just can't.
Amen.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kathy.
Well, that's it for this week. A big thanks goes out to Rob for sharing his family-focused bike adventures this week. Thanks, Rob. So email me your topics or names of cyclists you find interesting at MurphologyPodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out MurphologyPodcast.com to find all kinds of great info. I will leave you with this quote from the Unwritten Book of Murphology. This quote comes from Karen Salmonson. Anxiety happens when you think you have to figure out everything all at once. Breathe. You're strong. You got this. Take it day by day. Think about it.